The 13th of March 2022, Mexico City. The night was a suffocating shroud of humidity and exhaust fumes. Inside a nondescript sedan, a man whose name had been erased from every official database white-knuckled the steering wheel. He was an FBI-protected witness, a man who knew too much and had been promised the world in exchange for his silence. But as he glanced into the rearview mirror, his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Two twin pinpricks of light xenon headlights had been glued to his bumper for the last 10 miles. He didn't need to see the drivers to know who they were. The shadows of the Sinaloa cartel were long, reaching into the very heart of the impenetrable safe houses the Americans had built for him. His handler's number flashed on the dashboard screen, the phone vibrating with frantic urgency, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. To answer was to acknowledge the reality of his predicament. The headlights loomed closer, a predatory glare that seemed to mock his supposed invisibility. He was a protected asset, a ghost in the machine, yet here they were. The predators had found the ghost. Suddenly, the roar of engines eclipsed the sound of his own breathing. Two black SUVs, armored and menacing, surged forward, flanking him with the precision of a military strike. They didn't just find him. They knew his route, his stops, the exact moment his guard would be at its lowest. As he slammed on the brakes, the scent of burning rubber filled the cabin, and the world spun into a chaotic blur of screeching tires and shattering glass. Masked gunmen spilled out of the SUVs, their assault rifles leveled at his chest with cold, professional indifference. As the butt of a rifle crashed through his window, one thought consumed his final moments of consciousness. Asterisk. How? How did they find me? Was it a mole? Was it the crate? Or was I never truly hidden at all? Asterisk. To understand the tragedy of March 2022, one has to travel back to 2018. It began on a deceptively beautiful morning in Mexico City, the gates of the U.S. Embassy swung open as the vanguard of American diplomacy and law enforcement began their daily commute. Across the street, nestled in the shadows of a crumbling apartment block, a young man sat in a beat-up Honda. He looked like any other student catching up on sleep, his head tilted back, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. But he wasn't sleeping. Behind those dark lenses, his eyes were sharp, scanning every face, every vehicle, every subtle shift in the embassy's perimeter security. This was the cartel's newest play, a technological Sicario. He didn't carry a gold-plated 1911 or a submachine gun. His weapon of choice was a custom-built laptop and a high-gain antenna hidden in the trunk. He was a digital mercenary, hired not to pull a trigger, but to pull back the curtain on the world's most powerful investigative agency. The hacker spun a burner phone in his hand, his expression one of practiced boredom. His task was simple yet monumental. Identify the FBI's assistant legal attaché. The cartel hadn't given him a name or a photo. They had given him a ghost to hunt. They wanted the man who was orchestrating the takedown of their distribution hubs, the man who was convincing their lieutenants to flip. Find the man, the cartel had said, and then dissect his life until there was nothing left but bone. For 2 days, the hacker lived on caffeine and silence. He watched the patterns of the embassy staff. Most were easy to categorize: the analysts, the administrative staff, the career diplomats with their stiff suits and predictable hours. But then, he saw him. 7:30 a.m. A tall American, built like a linebacker but moving with the calculated grace of someone used to being watched. He didn't use a car with diplomatic plates.
Bingo!
He drove a modest, local sedan. He varied his exit points, but his eyes, always scanning the rooftops, always checking the mirrors, gave him away. In the world of counterintelligence, overcaution is its own kind of signature. Asterisk, bingo, asterisk, the hacker whispered. But identifying the target was merely the prologue to the nightmare. He reached for a black box connected to his laptop, a sophisticated IMSI catcher, a device designed to mimic a legitimate cell tower and trick nearby phones into connecting to it. As the American sedan pulled out into the morning traffic, the laptop emitted a soft, rhythmic times ping asterisk. The airwaves, invisible and crowded, suddenly yielded their secrets. A 10-digit number crawled across the screen, extracted from the digital ether. The hacker didn't laugh. He simply smiled a thin, cold smile. Operational security, OPSEC, was supposed to be the FBI's shield, but in the age of the smartphone, that shield was made of glass. Within 72 hours, that single string of digits would be signed in blood. The challenge, however, was significant. The FBI used encrypted devices, supposedly hardened against the prying eyes of foreign intelligence and criminal syndicates. But the hacker knew a secret that the NSA and the CIA rarely discussed in public. The global cellular network was built on a foundation of sand. He didn't need to follow the agent physically. That was a fool's errand that led to prison or a shallow grave. Instead, he would hunt from the safety of his keyboard, thousands of miles away from any crime scene. He began to exploit a vulnerability in signaling system No. 7SS7, the aging protocol that allows different phone networks to talk to each other. It was a backdoor, often utilized by state intelligence agencies, a door they insisted didn't exist while they used it to bypass the world's most sophisticated encryption. By midnight, the hacker had turned the agent's phone number into a master key. The process was agonizingly slow. A digital chess match played in the dark. He waited for a signal, a heartbeat from the FBI's internal servers that would indicate a breach. Nothing. The system was silent. He was inside. He had established a direct, invisible umbilical cord to the agent's digital life. Every call made, every message sent, even the encrypted ones left metadata crumbs. And most importantly, every GPS coordinate emitted by the device's internal radio flowed directly into the hacker's dashboard. The irony was delicious. For decades, the DEA and the FBI had spent billions of dollars to wiretap drug lords, hiding microphones in flower pots and tapping undersea cables. Now, the roles were reversed. In the 21st century, you didn't need to plant a bug. The target bought the bug, charged it every night, and carried it in his pocket everywhere he went, even into the most secure meetings. The smartphone had become a lighthouse, and the agent was the unwitting keeper, signaling his position to the wolves every few seconds. The hacker set his scripts to autopilot. A digital map of Mexico City flickered to life on his screen. A blue dot, representing the FBI agent, moved through the city in real time. The hunter had become the prey, blissfully unaware that his every movement was being logged on a cartel server. The hacker began to map the agent's life, where he grabbed his morning espresso, which gym he frequented, and crucially, which safe houses he visited to meet his clandestine sources. Every time the agent dialed a number, a notification popped up. Every time he parked his car for more than 10 minutes, a new point of interest was flagged for the cartel's enforcers. The FBI's billion-dollar infrastructure had been compromised by a piece of code that cost the cartel a mere $50,000, the price of a mid-sized SUV. It was the ultimate asymmetrical victory. The agent, meanwhile, felt a sense of professional pride. His operations were yielding results. He was meeting with high-level informants, people deep within the Sinaloa structure who were tired of the bloodshed. He followed every protocol. He checked for tails. He used dead drops. He believed he was a ghost. But as he sat in his office at the embassy, his phone resting on the desk, it was silently broadcasting his location to a dark web portal. The cartel wasn't just watching him. They were looking over his shoulder at his most sensitive assets. 1 week later, the first dissection began. The agent had scheduled a meeting with a new source, a local man, who claimed to have the coordinates for a major meth laboratory. They chose a quiet, upscale cafe in the western part of the city, a place where business suits were the norm and privacy was expected. The agent arrived early, scanned the room, and felt satisfied. It was a clean meet. He was tragically mistaken. Across the city, in a room lit only by the glow of multiple monitors, the hacker saw the blue dots stop. He cross-referenced the coordinates with the city's C5 surveillance system, a massive network of 58,000 government-controlled security cameras. With a few keystrokes, the hacker hijacked a high-definition dome camera overlooking the cafe's entrance. The irony was a jagged pill to swallow. The very system designed to protect the public was being used to facilitate a murder. The image was crystal clear. He saw the FBI agent sitting at a corner table. Then, he saw the informant, a young man in a tattered baseball cap, looking over his shoulder with eyes wide with terror. The camera zoomed in, capturing the informant's face in high resolution. Facial recognition software, fed by the cartel's own database of traitors, confirmed the man's identity within seconds. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. They shook hands. They parted ways. To the agent, it was a successful intelligence-gathering mission. To the hacker, it was a death warrant. The informant had exactly 6 hours of life remaining. That evening, as the informant drove home to his family, he felt a momentary sense of relief. He believed he had done the right thing. He didn't notice the black SUV that pulled out of a side street 3 blocks from his house. He didn't see the flash of high beams. By the time the SUV forced him off the road, it was already over. 2 men, their faces obscured by tactical masks, dragged him from his vehicle. His phone fell to the pavement, the screen spiderwebbing into 1,000 shards. There were no screams, just the heavy thud of a car door and the screech of tires. The next morning's news would carry a small segment about a missing person, another statistic in a city of vanished souls. The FBI agent was baffled. His source had gone dark. He called the number repeatedly, only to be met with the cold, mechanical drone of a voicemail box. No body was found. No ransom was demanded. It was as if the man had simply been erased from reality. The agent went through his notes, searching for a breach in his own protocol. He found none. He didn't know that the ghost he was chasing was actually the device in his own pocket. Over the next 3 months, the bleeding continued. Every source the agent touched eventually withered and died. A second informant, a woman working in a federal Mexican office who had been leaking documents, received a text message on her private phone. Asterisk, we saw you with him. Asterisk, it read. Asterisk, next time, we won't just be watching. Asterisk, she didn't wait for a second warning. She burned her life to the ground, threw her phone into a sewer, and fled to the border with a single suitcase, leaving behind everything she had ever known. She was one of the lucky ones. By the end of 2019, the FBI's intelligence network in Mexico City was in a state of total collapse. 3 years of painstakingly built relationships had been incinerated in 90 days. The agent was haunted, his eyes sunken from lack of sleep. He became convinced there was a high-level mole within the embassy or the Mexican police. He initiated internal audits, changed his encryption keys, and swapped his phone every week. But it was too late. The hacker had already mapped the agent's digital signature. Changing the hardware didn't matter when the system itself was compromised. The cartel was always one step ahead, hovering like a specter over every move the FBI made. They weren't just winning the war, they were making the very concept of investigation impossible. In a state of utter desperation and professional ruin, the FBI recalled the agent to Washington in 2020. The official report cited compromised local conditions and a loss of viable assets. The agent left Mexico with his head down, shadowed by the ghosts of the men and women who had trusted him and paid the ultimate price. He would spend years wondering where the leak was, never realizing that he had been the leak. The truth remained buried for 7 long years. It wasn't until June 2025 that a heavily redacted report from the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General was leaked to the press. The findings were chilling. A single hacker, working for the Sinaloa cartel, had successfully exploited global telecommunications vulnerabilities to track an FBI official for over a year. The report admitted that the cartel had used the agent as an unintentional homing beacon to identify, track, and execute multiple high-value informants. The audit described it as the most catastrophic failure of technical surveillance in the history of the Bureau. It warned that the gap between criminal capability and government protection had widened to a dangerous degree. The good guys were playing a game of checkers, while the cartels had hired grandmasters to play 3-dimensional chess with the world's cellular infrastructure. In the wake of the scandal, the FBI overhauled its entire mobile protocol. New devices, new satellite-based communication channels, and a mandatory blackout policy for field agents became the new norm. They tried to close the door, but the room was already empty. The damage was done. The informants were dead, the operations were burned, and the hacker, the digital ghost, who had started it all, had vanished into the dark corners of the internet, likely working for a new master with even deeper pockets. But the most haunting realization wasn't the technical failure itself. It was the psychological shift it created. The war had moved beyond bullets and territory. It was now a war of information, where a single line of code was more lethal than 1,000 sicarios. As the sun sets over the modern skyline of Mexico City today, the embassy stands as a fortress of glass and steel. But inside, the agents look at their phones with a new kind of suspicion. They know that somewhere, in a darkened room with a glowing screen, someone might be watching. They know that in the digital age, there is no such thing as protected. The question that lingers in the halls of power isn't whether it will happen again, but who is being watched right now. Because somewhere on the other side of the world, a new hacker is typing a command, waiting for that first, fatal times ping asterisk. And this time, they aren't working for a cartel. They are working for someone much, much more patient. In a world where everyone is connected, no one is ever truly alone. And in the shadows of the network, the hunt never ends. It only evolves,